Now, another quality of discipleship is motivation. Motivation. And we've talked about what is your motivation. So when I use the term motivation, it's not what is your motivation. I mean, do you have the motivation to do it? And I look around the world and I see people all the time doing things because they want to do it. Not because their friends are doing it, not because it's going to make them feel better, but because they're interested in it. I see people going to the gym without a partner because they know the benefits of going to the gym and exercising. I see people spending hours playing musical instruments because they just want to get better at it. They want to have that experience of being able to play like that and contribute that kind of music to their own life and maybe to the lives of others. Spiritually speaking, the spiritual path is a solitary path, ultimately. And the motivation that we have to be a true disciple has to be there for ourselves. It has to be there for ourselves. So you have to want it for you. You have to want to have that motivation, like, yeah, sure, I'm going to go sit in a chair for an hour and a half, and I'm going to crank through some meditation techniques. I'm going to figure out how can I get deeper into this process. And you're engaged in it, and you're interested in it, and you're enthused about it, and you're alive with it. Not because anyone else, not because you're going to talk about it with anybody else, not because of any other reason than you want to do it. You're motivated to do it. Yogananda said to Mr. Davis when Mr. Davis was very young, and if I recall how this story went, Mr. Davis, again, wasn't much more than probably 19 or so, I would imagine. He might have even been 18. But he was coming back to visit Paramahansa Yogananda, and Mr. Davis was very serious and dedicated and sincere and motivated from the beginning. He just wanted to have this experience of greater clarity of consciousness. And Roy had been sent to the Phoenix Center away from the big organization of Self-Realization Fellowship. And as Mr. Davis was coming back to visit Yogananda, he was walking through the grounds, and I think I overheard him say that he saw some of the monks like just kind of goofing around and not being serious, and Mr. Davis became judgmental about that. He's like, well, why aren't they taking this seriously? They have this wonderful opportunity and they're just being kids, teenagers, which they were, so whatever. But when he saw Yogananda said to him, don't allow yourself to be too concerned about what others do or don't do. Don't look back, don't look to the left, don't look to the right, look straight ahead to the goal and go all the way in this lifetime, and you can. Yogananda was saying that to him so Mr. Davis would learn it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. It doesn't matter if your spiritual friends are really just goofing off. It doesn't matter if no one else in the world is interested in these things. You yourself have to have the motivation to stick to what you know to be true and to go all the way in this lifetime. So motivation is necessary. And think about anything else in your life that you have gotten good at. And maybe you've not gotten good at anything in your life. Believe me, there are plenty of people that for some reason never seem to try to get good at anything. But if there's something that you have a natural inclination towards, that you have just been interested in, that you have done, you would pick up and read the magazines about it, whether anyone else cared or not. You would go to conferences about it, or you would spend hours, if you could, focusing on it. That kind of motivation, you have to find a way to find it here. And maybe you already have it. And if you do, that's wonderful. If you don't, you have to figure out, how do I get it? How do I make this alive for me? So the ability to be self-motivated is necessary. If you're dependent on others in any way for motivation, then your likelihood of success is already in jeopardy. Because people come and go. People come and go. Groups provide as much support as they do distracting drama. But throughout the whole thing, it's your own decisive action to wake up that is the only factor which will consistently carry you forward. And when one is awake, one is not swayed by outer circumstances. So your motivation to wake up can't be affected by outer circumstances. The motivation has to be your own, and it has to come from within. This is one of the qualities of being a disciple on this path. And again, this is going to be true for being a disciple on any path, any spiritual path, or anything you want to accomplish. So you'll be more receptive to learning well when you think, feel, and believe that it is possible. And we have to consider another quality, which is, do you have the ability to learn? Most people don't ever think about this, do they? Do you have the ability to learn? Some people don't, or at least they don't have the ability to learn things rapidly. And that's okay, because you can still grow slowly, and that's better than nothing at all. But do you have the ability to learn? Do you have the ability to sit and hear and listen and apply and try? Because many come to the spiritual path with preconceived notions that they want validated, usually childish things. They don't come to actually learn. And if you consider it, if your preconceived notions about what it means to be enlightened, or to be clear, or to be awake, were conducive to enlightenment, you would already be enlightened. So validating those preconceived notions, it isn't going to miraculously empower them. So you have to ask, do I have the capacity to learn? You have to ask, am I really willing to let go of what I thought was true? Am I willing to try a new approach and be open and willing to experience the results of that new approach? And this is something that has happened repeatedly in my own practice. I had ideas. Some of them were true. Some of them had to be cast aside, which required a shift in understanding. I'd then live from that new understanding, as we discussed previously in an earlier section. The spiritual path is not an academic experience. It is not just about reading things or reciting things. It's not just an academic experience. We may not have the intellectual capacity to understand what is being shared. You know that's true when someone's talking to you and you're thinking, I have no idea what they're talking about. This is just, it's almost like your brain gears are crunching around and you're trying, but it's just not going together. Sometimes we don't have the intellectual capacity to understand what is being shared. Consider the holy science. Okay, go read that book. Tell me if you understand it from cover to cover on the first go. It's likely that the intellectual capacity is not there. And it's easy to say, well, I just don't have the intellectual capacity, so I guess I'm out of luck. So I'm going to go find a devotional teacher who's just going to tell me to chant mantras and smile a lot, and that'll do it for me. But that's an excuse, and that's a waste of time sometimes. Not that devotion is a waste of time. That is very helpful. It's one half of the whole process. But if you don't have the intellectual capacity, you got to get it somehow. If you don't understand the meanings of words that are being shared, whether it's Sanskrit or otherwise, look them up. Wonder about them until you finally get it. If you can't grasp larger concepts, like, for example, what's described in, well, some parts of the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, but one of the biggest concepts to grasp are what's described in the Holy Science by Sri Yukteswar. If you can't grasp those concepts, you have to learn to practice contemplation to encourage comprehension. So there are ways to increase our intellectual capacity, and they are necessary, and we have to do them if we don't have the intellectual capacity. And I discuss contemplation in the book Kriya Yoga Vichara. When we started this session, we were doing a little bit of imagination. So one of the things that can help increase your capacity, your intellectual capacity to understand larger concepts, is to imagine that you get it. It doesn't mean that you are lying to yourself or that you're making it up that you understand what you don't. It all comes down to having the feeling of, okay, finally, I got that. And what I have noticed in my own life is if there are things that I can't quite get, I can't wrap my head around, or my awareness is just too small at the moment, even if I can't fully intellectually grasp it, if I imagine that it's possible, if I have that sense of openness and freedom that, yeah, finally I got that. If I hold that long enough, eventually I'll go back to that text and it's like something clicks. It's like I made the space for it to happen. So when you don't understand something, what is the feeling that tends to happen? Or what tends to happen? You either ignore it, you brush it aside, and you think, well, that's not important. And then you miss out on a lot. Or you feel stupid. And when you feel stupid, you lock down. It's like a feeling of like, oh, I can't get that. What's wrong with me? It brings in these negative self-esteem emotions of contraction. So the way you counteract that is it may be perfectly true that you really don't understand it right now. But if you can take a deep breath and feel like you're expanding outward, like remember when you have understood something, that aha moment of, wow, you felt good, you felt clear inside, you felt open. Well, you have to bring up that feeling, imagine it, and then kind of say to yourself, I'm so glad I finally got that. I'm glad I understand what this means, and affirm that for yourself. And you do that until it finally happens. So this isn't about lying. This isn't about being untruthful. This is about, in a sense, kind of projecting into your future self that does know it, and just being so thankful that you finally figured it out. This is, in a sense, a metaphysical way to increase your intellectual capacity. It's not to take the place of looking up words you don't understand. It's not to take the place of sitting down and thinking it through. You know, in our current culture, we have a thinking deficit. People just don't know how to think. It's too stressful for them. They won't allow themselves the hard work of trying to figure something out. So you might have to work out that inner muscle of being okay, being uncomfortable, thinking about something, trying to pick it apart and stretch your brain a little bit. You have to be able to do that. So the ability to learn has to be there. It can be in other areas of life too. For example, when it comes to musical instruments, there are some musical instruments that I just knew how to do. You pick this, you put your fingers here, you move things around, it works great. There are other instruments that I learned to play which were just hard. They didn't make any sense. You had to do one thing with one hand, another thing with another hand, while thinking about 3 or 4 other things. And my body just couldn't do it at the time, but I knew I could. So I would work on one little bit, get the body moving in 1/4 of the way. Then I would start to add the next little bit, so half the way. And it was terrible. It wasn't working. They weren't clicking together, but I kept knowing it was possible. So I kept trying until eventually I had like 3 seconds where they both locked in at the same time, and I got it. Success. All right, I've had 3 seconds of success, which means I can have more. So I kept trying, this is hard. I kept trying, this is hard. Oh, wait a minute, I just did it for a minute? That's amazing. And it kept going. Think about people who play drums. I don't play drums, but this is one of the reasons why I haven't yet. Because you got to hit something here, use a whole other beat here. You've got to stomp your foot one way while stomping the other foot a different way. You've got each hand doing different things all at once. And that's a ridiculous thing, but drummers figure out how to do it, don't they? It's through practice. So the same is true with understanding things spiritually. You have to be okay in the uncomfortableness, in the trying, while also maintaining that sense of it's possible. Yeah, I can do this. So spiritual learning is a continual process. It's continuous. After a set number of years of meditation sessions, you don't cease to learn. You don't hit a point where you're just done. As long as you are alive and breathing, it's continuous. And part of the ability to learn is your capacity to continue learning. So the sincere disciple has to avoid the trap of complacency. It's so easy to fall into. Mr. Davis would always advise, once you've reached a peaceful, clear state, sure, you want to stay there. And it's okay to stay there for a little while. But eventually you have to inquire, is there anything beyond this? Is there anything beyond this? So it's a continuous process. It keeps going. Just like you in your own life, don't think you're going to retire and be done. You have to keep going. as long as you are alive, there's something for you to do, to offer, to learn, to study. Keep moving. When you're done, you'll know, because you'll be done. You won't have a body anymore.